is, I mean, we're so glad to have you on board, and, you know, we're so glad that it's enabled the Tour de France to happen. But why do we need a title sponsor? Because we don't have the men's Tour de France sponsored by LCL. We just have all the sponsors sponsoring the jerseys and on the board. So why does it have to be different?
Yeah, I think maybe that's just what it took, honestly, for the ASO to really take that leap. ASO, one of the most historic institutions in cycling. Zwift, one of the newest kind of game changers, you know, think differently. So I think, you know, they needed that confidence that we said, hey, we're in it for at least 4 years. We believe in it. We believe in the Women's Pro Tour. We know people are going to love this. We knew it was going to be a success. Yeah, but it is interesting. It's kind of crazy when you think it's Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. Did anybody ever think Tour de France would ever put a sponsor in the title? But I'm happy for it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So when these initial conversations started, honestly, did you see it progressing so rapidly? Did you think it would come to fruition in the time that it did?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the time. Anybody that watches women's cycling right now, I don't know about anybody, can I get a hand raised for anybody that has watched more women's cycling this year than they ever have? That's just because you had the opportunity, you know. You used to have to follow women's races on Twitter. So it's the time. There's been some significant developments in the sport. You know, riders are actually making minimum salaries, and there's been a lot more investment in the sport. And the more and more we allow audiences, sponsors, fans to see it, the more they want to see it. So there was no question that this was going to be a wild success.
How did you go about, and I'm going to come to everybody on this one, how did you get to the point where you knew how many stages, who would be your race director, how much involvement did you and Zwift have with exactly how that race would look?
Yeah, we are working hand in hand with the ASO, but it is ASO, and we all know ASO, like, they have a way of doing things. So, but I've been really happy with the partnership, because it truly is a partnership, and with our name in the title, we need to have, you know, some influence. We need to have some visibility on how this race is going to evolve, how it's going to be seen. So yeah, it's been a very nice working partnership, and there's been great conversations. It's going to get stronger, bigger, more visible every year.
And you know, this is something I've been quite vocal about over social media, and when we've talked at shows like this, is the fact that when it was announced as 8 stages, there was a lot of chatter across social media mainly, a lot of tweets going out saying, oh, hang on a minute, where's this parity? Because it's not 3 weeks, it's not 21 stages. But I spoke a lot about why I think it was absolutely spot on, and not only because we're good friends, but because I thought it was absolutely the right decision. But I'd love to know, Lizzy, what was your initial response to the announcement of the stages and where it would go?
I think actually I was surprised quite how balanced it was, and that it was exactly what we needed. We've already got a packed calendar. Every year we're adding more and more races, but we're not adding more riders to the roster. We're not really, you know, adding more team staff. So we simply couldn't cope with more days than that. You know, this year they didn't move the Giro either. So the riders had a 10-day race at the Giro, which is our longest race on the calendar. Then they had about 10 days off, and then they had to go straight into the 8 days of the Tour de France. And yes, it's only 8 days, but the thing about the Tour de France that makes it so much harder is that every day you've got the stress of the media, the stress of the fact that it's the Tour de France. Everybody wants to talk about it. There's so much more going on that it's just so much more exhausting per day than it is with any other race. So I think this was the perfect balance to allow there to actually be a race, be an interesting race, keep people excited for the full duration of the race, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, every day was incredibly exciting. There was always things to talk about, and they've replicated that again for next year, and I think that that's the right thing to do. You know, perhaps in the future you could grow it to 9 days by starting it on the Saturday, But I think that at the moment, that is the right length, given where we are in the women's peloton.
Yeah, and you've got to get it right from the ground up. And I will come to you, Kate, but I think that's the thing. Listening to riders, especially as a race director and people that are going to be riding this race, That's so important, because I think the rest of us from the outside, we can have an opinion, we can say, well, we'd like to ideally have it here, and of course we all would, we can't argue against that, but it's got to be right. And I think last year here at Rouleur Live, talking to Anna van der Briggen, like, she was talking very much about the team structure, and actually coming straight off the back of another stage race of that magnitude, are you going to have the strength and fields to say, right, this team is solely going to focus on the Tour de France Femmes avec the Zwift?
Yeah, and that's also what keeps growing now, and you can see it in teams also. Yeah, like you see the rosters for next year coming on, and you see that teams are growing. There are like 15, 16 riders on the roster for like 2 years back, or now it's 12 riders, 11 riders. So it's growing for these kinds of races. So also the women's peloton is changing on these kinds of races and developing for that too. So.
Going back to what you were saying, Becca, as well, you know, looking into, it's not just the riders and the roster, you know, that you've got to think about, and whether you've got enough riders. Of course, we've got the added difficulty of COVID and so many other illnesses at the moment as well, but teams often only have 2 mechanics or 2 Swannies, and they can only do so much. A Grand Tour, a 10-day Giro, or an 8-day Tour de France is exhausting for them as well, and if you don't balance it carefully, you not only burn out all your riders, but you burn out your staff too.
Yeah, and you're nodding there, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. The sport is evolving, and there's already, I love it, after this year's tour, already hearing more sponsors coming to the table, to teams, riders being able to demand more salary. That visibility is huge, and Paris was not built in a day, and it's, you know, we're going to grow this race in a sustainable way. And the vision is definitely a multi-week stage race, but we're going to get there in a way that is good for the teams, it's good for the fans, and, you know, it's going to ultimately come to a really wonderful place.
Oh, it's such exciting times, it really is. Something that really stood out for me was the rider presentation and the prestige around the Tour that we've known for so many years and years and years in the men's peloton. But to see the spotlight on the women's peloton was spectacular. What did you make of it all in the lead up?
Yeah, it was quite intense for us, actually. We didn't expect it to be like that, because we knew we were going to start in Paris, but we've been in races that we were like men's and women's races, and that the women's were like 9 o'clock in the morning on the sidelines. We were just doing our ride, and then at 1 o'clock, the men's peloton would start, and then everyone would come out to watch the men's race. And for this, it was so spectacular. There were so many people out to watch the women's start. The men's haven't even gone out of the start again. And for us, the team presentation with the Eiffel Tower on the background, it was just very like surreal. And actually, we kept questioning, like, why are all these people, are they all here for us? And like, yeah, they're all here for you guys. And
did you really feel that?
Yeah, and the whole peloton felt like that. It was already
like almost a surprise.
Yeah, it was really surprising to see that so many people were excited about women's cycling, which is, yeah, it's a great thing that it's happening. But yeah, for the riders, it's a thing to get used to, because we were not used to that a few years ago, and it's something we need to. And also, like Lizzy said, it's press, it's all that stuff that comes with it, and that makes like an event like a tour like so important for women's cycling.
Yeah, I mean, and you're like, get used to it.
I love it.
We saw so much press.
Yeah.
I never imagined that we would have that appetite for press during any women's race ever. I mean, the cycling news feeds were full of it. I was reporting with the cycling podcast during the Tour de France, and we were doing daily episodes, and we had so much feedback, we had so much interaction, more than we ever get. And it was so surprising, but it just showed that what happens when you put something like the Tour de France out there, and that we do need the Tour de France, which rises above everything else in cycling. We need that to bring in these people who, maybe they're sports fans, maybe they've, watched the men's Tour de France, but maybe they don't really know about women's cycling. And once you put that platform out there, the same with the women's Euros that we saw last year, you put that out there and everybody comes. And the other thing that's so great is that when you have these women's events, you see such a greater diversity of people on the side of the road. Again, back with the women's Euro football championships, we saw young kids, young boys and girls at the championships, and you don't usually see that because the atmosphere at the women's events was just so different. It was so much more inclusive. And I think from these events, then you will get young boys and young girls growing up and thinking, okay, I can be a sports person, not only I can be a male footballer. They don't they won't have these barriers and these obstacles because they will just see it, and it's just so important.
Tell us a bit more about the coverage that you did this year, because you were on the other side of the fence doing more of my role and asking the questions to the riders. How much did you enjoy that?
It was really nice, actually. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to be there racing, but if you can't be there racing, it's the next best thing. And it's so different because when you're in the race, I think sometimes people don't realize that you maybe don't understand everything that's happened in the race, because you have this very singularly focused view in the race. You only see what you see. You don't see the stuff behind you. You don't see the stuff in front of you. And we have this privileged position as viewers where we see everything. So often you'll get to the end of the race and interviewers will pick apart a rider and say, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And sometimes, the riders might give seemingly stupid answers, but the reality is that they don't know everything that's happened. So being able to look at it from a different perspective and see everything was really nice, actually.
Marjolein, how was the experience for you? Talk us through it.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with Lizzy there. Yeah, it's if you're in the race, like I've seen, like I just said to the girls, they go, oh, I see the images now of Champs-Élysées. I was like, for me, that's a totally different experience. Yeah, it's just about like, you're so focused on what you have to do and the things you're doing, you basically don't even like know about crashes and stuff and all that's happened, and like in the evening you watch like the summary of everything and you're like, oh wow, okay, that all of that happened, I didn't know. But yeah, that's just how it goes in racing, and that's also what you need to do. You don't need to focus on everything else. You need to focus on your job and need to do that well. And I think if you're able to do that, you don't see all of that happening. But yeah, I think it can be really interesting sometimes to just like have an outlook on everyone else's perspective and see what's going on there.
Yeah, I was just going to hop in there and say, as a journalist, you definitely have moments as well where you have no idea what's happened when there's not been coverage in the past. And you're running around the finishing straight. Someone says, oh, actually, I just crashed and got back on 100 meters back, and you haven't seen it. So I think we're all often in that boat. But Kate, I want to touch upon, the news of next year's event, and yeah, how's that been received?
Oh, very exciting. So we had the route announcement last week in grand style in Paris. And the announcement of Stage 7, we're going up the Col de Tourmalet, iconic climb. We had a big climb this year, but this is a proper Tour de France climb. So very excited about that. The final time trial in Pau. There hasn't been a time trial to finish the Tour since, I think, Le Mans won it. Then they stopped doing that. So it's going to be a really great course, very challenging. Very challenging from the start. There's definitely those first couple stages going through the Massif Central. It's really going to be gorgeous, and the women are going to have their own start this year in Clermont-Ferrand. It's going to be just a really gorgeous race. I can't wait. I really can't wait. And the feedback from riders, the feedback from media has been super positive. That this is, showing some great evolutions, that this is a proper Tour de France stage race that we're going to grow every year, and it's got those iconic elements, time trial and iconic climbs. Those are Tour elements, and we need them. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be hot, yeah.
Lizzy.
Also, it's actually going to be hot.
Yeah, that's true. Lizzy, I was going to say, what's your feedback? Kate's just mentioned that feedback from riders. What do you make of the route this year?
Yeah, I think it's really well balanced. I think it's really nice to start in a different way to last year. We don't really have a ceremonial sprint stage. We just go straight in, and it's going to be really, really tough from the beginning. Right in the beginning of the race, it's a point that can catch out the GC riders. The first two stages, the finishes, there's really punchy climbs at the end, and so if you're not absolutely on your game, if something happens, then it could, you could really be put back a lot. I think for a rider like Annemiek van Vleuten, she actually might not like this Tour route as much as perhaps the previous one, because on this year's one we had two stages where we had big climbs at the end. So if something happens and it doesn't quite go right for you, but you're the strongest climber, you've got more of a chance to bring it back. Whereas this, you've got one day. She's going to have those first 6 days of stress. Her, and let's be honest, all of the other riders, because I think there'll be so much more competition next year. We had Marta Cavalli out with injury and many others. So she's going to have those first 6 days where she's just going to be constantly stressed, trying to navigate the peloton, not crashing. We know sometimes she doesn't like the downhill. She can get scared. and then there's really only one day where she's got to lay everything out there, and then there's not going to be that big a time gap in the time trial, and it's also a risky business. You know, we very nearly saw Jonas Vingegaard lose the yellow jersey in the time trial this year, so anything can happen. So I think that some of the GC riders might not be so happy, but the punchers like Lotte Kopecky are going to be pretty happy with that route, and I think the fans should be happy because it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's really going to showcase the depth of the peloton, similar to this year. I mean, those, oh my God, those first like 5 stages, different winners, like really showed the power of the peloton. It was great.
Yeah, and I think especially the whole peloton is really happy about the time trial in the end. Most of the girls have been asking for a time trial in the World Tour because this year, I think there was no World Tour time trials this year.
Oh, wow.
So that's the thing that, like, especially for the specialists like Ellen van Dijk, like Josh Loden, and like they were like, waiting for a good time trial, and like this is the highest stage to do a time trial on.
You know, I actually wasn't sure if we should put a time trial in the Tour de France, because I think time trials can be a bit boring. But I thought if you were going to put one in, you had to put it at the start or the finish. And I think the way that you've done this, and finishing in Pau, which is such an iconic town for the Tour de France, and of course we raced there a couple of years ago in the course by the Tour de France, and it was absolutely phenomenal race, won by Marianne Vos, of course. And I think that's the way to do it. Then you've got everybody hanging on for that last moment.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I'm just casting an eye to just how iconic these images actually are. And I think that was something that, you know, of course, we can talk more about the dynamic of the race and the result, but I think just the jerseys, having the opportunity to see the images that we have just desperately wanted. I mean, for me, it was absolute goosebumps, Kate. How did it feel on that day when it all kicked off, just knowing how far you'd come?
Yeah, it was very emotional, and I heard from a lot of riders, I heard from press. It was just a very emotional day. It was so thrilling just to see the women take this stage. They deserve this stage. Everyone wanted to see them on this stage. One of the things that we weren't sure about is if the fans would come out in France. So they're going to line the course like they do for the men, and oh my God, they did. And there was like an average of a 26% audience share on French TV, peak of 5 million people viewing just in France alone. So, you know, people want to see this. And the women brought the action, they brought the passion. I mean, everybody who saw the stage 3 interview of, Celia Trubluberg after she won, there was these moments. We're creating superstars. They deserve this stage, and I was just so thrilled to play any part in, showing the world how awesome women's cycling is.
And it's brilliant to see the personalities, isn't it? I mean, we all love an interview with her. She's just spectacular. And I just think, oh, here we go. She never fails to deliver. It's absolutely fantastic. And you briefly touched upon Marianne Vos, Lizzie, a moment ago. And I think we were talking earlier, weren't we, in the green room, about just how special it is that, not only that she gets to ride the Tour de France Femmes, but actually, the results that she delivered, the jerseys that we saw her in, because, her legacy has spanned not only multi-disciplines, but so many years. And to have this for her when she's still at that pinnacle is pretty special.
Yeah, I think it was very iconic for the race and very important for the race as well. And, she is a name that, like the Tour de France, will resonate above sport. And so just seeing her in the yellow jersey and having her in that yellow jersey for a number of days will have sparked so many more conversations than if it was a rider that we didn't know. But I think really for me, I hope that if it's next year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, I hope that we don't have to come back here and talk to you, wait for it, about women's cycling. Because we don't have any talk this week about how great the last years have been for men's cycling, do we? No. So why are we sitting here doing this? Okay, because it's necessary. But what I want to do is I want to come back in a few years' time and I want to talk about the rivalries of the Tour de France. And we're going to talk about Pogacar, and we're going to talk about Vingegaard, and we're going to talk about Vollering versus Van Vleuten. And we're going to talk about the new whippersnappers of the Tour de France, whether it be Fred Wright or Niamh Fisher-Black. But I don't want to have to segregate it. Unfortunately, we have to do that at the moment because we need to continue telling the world how great it is, because we need people to understand how good it is to start to invest in it. And once they do, then they get hooked, and then they just keep coming back. But I really, really hope that that's not going to be necessary for that much longer.
Question to all the panel. Do we think that gap to Van Vleuten is going to change? Is it going to come down? Is the dynamic changing?
Well, it's going to change when she retires next year anyway. But until then, I think, for sure, there's a lot of possibilities. If you saw in the Tour de France already, like, Cavalli was out in the beginning. She was so close to Van Vleuten she won in Flash and Amstel, and how she did that was amazing. And she's also so young, and there's still some other, like, Demi also following. She's still young and growing, and if you see the work that Van Vleuten is putting in, like, if people can get to that level, it takes years to build that level. So for sure, there's still ways to grow and to get there, and there's also a lot of young talents coming and trying to take her place.
Oh, it's amazing watching following, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, will she retire though? I mean, she says she is.
You pointed out to me before as well, Maya, that like obviously there's Ashley Moolman-Pasio on Vollering's team, and she's moving to another team next year, and we're gonna free Ashley. And we're going to see what she can do.
You're on a campaign to free Ashley.
We've got a campaign to free Ashley Moolman-Pasio.
Did anybody see Ash cracked Van Vleuten in the last tour of the year and took the stage and then took the tour? So
that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah,
free Ashley Moolman-Pasio.
Yep, she's human. What a phenomenal competitor! My God, just incredible, and just a really, truly, once in a generation competitor. But we've seen her be human, so you never know. It's a long race, it's a hard race. There's going to be a lot of factors, I'm looking at Ash, I'm looking at Marta Cavalli, I'm looking at Utra Ludwig. There's some really great climbers that can keep her in sight. Demi and Kasia had an amazing tour. Yeah, so it's going to be great.
And I want to just hop right back to something you said at the beginning of our chat, before we have to close in a few minutes, about the pathway and the Zwift Academy. And I think it's really important to touch upon that briefly before we close, because actually it really tangibly has got people to the World Tour that wouldn't have otherwise got there in terms of, logistics, geography. Can you tell us a bit about the success of that?
Yeah, that program, it was so unique and groundbreaking and honestly very risky when we started it. When we said we were going to find the next pro on our virtual indoor platform, you can imagine there was some head scratching and sort of, we definitely had a hard time with the media that year. And now we have, I think we've launched the careers of over 10 pros, maybe 12 pros now. With Jay Vine, I don't know if anybody saw the announcement today. Jay Vine came through Zwift Academy. He just signed with UAE next year for, I'm sure, what is an exorbitant sum. Neve Bradbury got 9th in the Giro this year. This girl from Australia that, it's hard to be seen in women's cycling. If you don't live in just the right area that has great racing, great community, the right coach and the right network, and you get on the right Devo team, if there is a Devo team, it's hard. So we just thought, hey, we've got this global platform where, you can see all your data. Let's give people a chance to try out for a pro team. And it's just been an incredible journey. We have Zwift Academy finals coming up in a few weeks in Denia, Spain, and you're going to see it on GCN in December. But what a phenomenal program. When I started that program in 2016, we had 1,000 women competing, and Leah Thorvaldsen won that contract for Canadian SRAM Racing. This past year, I think we had close to 200,000 compete across the men's and women's. So what a great program. And the cool thing is it's not just a pro pathway, it's also like a community training program. It's for everybody to kind of see what they can do.
Oh yeah, even I did it.
Yeah, so it's been really fun. And it also got us really close to the scene in women's cycling and understanding the challenges, the barriers that women face. When we first offered Leah that contract, we kind of heard how much it was going to be, and I was like, oh man, does she want to quit her job and do that? So it's a really, really unique program, just something we can do as a virtual platform. It's very cool, I mean, it's bizarre what Zwift can do. But very fun, and just, we're trying to make cycling more accessible, more inclusive, and do some really cool things on the outside too.
Oh, we're excited. I've got time to squeeze in one final question that I wanted to ask you. Now, am I right in saying that pre-pandemic, you weren't sure if you would stay in the sport of cycling. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. I lost my love of it, and I've been cycling since I was 7, so I've been born into cycling, and I loved it. And then I got into a team that I just didn't enjoy cycling anymore, and it got too focused on basically results, doing your job, and not enjoying it. And then I got onto drops, and that changed everything for me. And I got into a team that actually I enjoyed racing with and felt like family to me, which I now know that it's one of the most important things. It's not just about the performance. It's not just about focusing on where you want to go, but also about when you're doing it, that you're having fun. And that's most of the time when people think back on their careers, they're like, did you reach this and this and this? But yeah, did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? And I think that's the most important thing for me to keep saying also to myself. And when I'm doing it, I'm like, I just want to enjoy myself. I want to get the results, of course I do. But if I didn't get the results, I do want to enjoy what I'm doing. And I think the way women's cycling is going right now, it's just really good fun to be in.
I love that philosophy. It's not all about results, but 13th at Paris-Roubaix, not too shabby. Well, okay. I mean, that moment must have been pretty special. I mean,
that was quite cool.
I mean, inaugural edition, but especially the conditions that day. Let's just briefly hear your experience of that.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping for some rain next time. But this year was quite dry. But last year, it was raining. It was everything you wanted to be. It was the first time for everyone. So that was a big, big thing again for women's cycling, which we enjoyed so much. Everyone was quite scared, I think, but mainly excited. We were all enjoying it, having fun. And once, you got on the velodrome, you were like, okay, this is quite cool. And in my head, I had all these plans about like doing sprint on the velodrome and when to go and all that. I just hung onto the wheel and tried to like get to the finish. But you get all these experiences. And I've seen men's racing since I've been so young. And I've been watching it. I knew all the cobble sections before I ever done the race. And once I was doing it, I was like, this is so cool. It's just all excitement. So we'll keep doing it and keep growing the sport and keep growing Paris-Roubaix and everything in between. And I think that's a really good thing in the way we're going.
That is a brilliant note to end on. Please join me in saying a huge thank you. Put your hands together for fantastic guests, Marjolein, Lizzy and Kate. Now, don't go anywhere, or if you do, grab a quick drink, because Matt Stevens is going to be up on the stage in less than 10 minutes' time, and he's going to be talking to Kasia Niewiadoma and Taylor Finney. I absolutely can't wait for that. And another little reminder, if you haven't already seen, because you lovely people are here tonight, we are offering an exclusive discount on a Rouleur subscription, and it's less than half price. There's QR codes around. Have a look for those, or ask anyone in a Rouleur t-shirt for some help. And get subscribing. Thanks for joining us.